Hello, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel, Joe's Book and Movie Corner. Today I have a reading report for you for July 20th, 2025. So what I'll do is I will go through the books that I've read, some of the books that I'm currently reading. Then I'm going to talk about a kind of tentative TBR or pile of possibilities for the next couple of weeks. And then I'll wrap it up with some talk about the movies and TV shows that I've watched, because I have some interesting things to say about some things that I've watched recently. So let's go ahead and get started with what I've read and what I'm currently reading. So the first thing I want to talk about is Margaret Wander Bonanno's Bonnano, we'll go with. Strangers from the Sky. This is a Star Trek giant novel from the late 80s. I believe 1987 or 89. It came out right 1987. Came out right around the start of Star Trek Next Generation. And if you're not familiar with Star Trek novels, this is from the 80s and 90s. Pocket books ran what was generally kind of referred to as maybe the numbered era. Most of the books had numbers assigned to them, and every once in a while you would get one that was labeled a giant novel. And the giant novels were kind of where, if the numbered novels felt like unaired episodes, the giant novels, at least the few that I've read, seem to be a little bit broader and a little bit grander in scope than the regular numbered novels. So this is one of the giant novels, and we're reading this one for BookTrek 2025, and also I'm reading this with several other booktubers in a group reads, or a buddy reads, created by Brandy from Book Collecting. There's still at least one or two people still reading the book in the group. I would say most people that have finished it have actually liked it. Not everyone in the group enjoyed it, though. But personally, I really enjoyed it. Now, it's to kind of give a summary, and I talked about this last week. So briefly, to give a summary, it's actually a little complex. It tells the story of an untold first contact between Vulcans and humans. In the novel, there's an established history of first contact between Vulcans and humans. It does not match what we see in Star Trek First Contact. So Star Trek First Contact had rendered this obsolete or non-canon. But in the 23rd century? I'm getting my centuries wrong, but in the time period between Star Trek the Motion Picture and Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, a book within universe called Strangers from the Sky is released, and it's an alternate history book that tells the story of an earlier first contact between Vulcans and humans. And then in the second half of the book, so the first half of the book, it's really interesting. You're reading sections from or excerpts from Strangers in the Sky, the book within a book, and then you're kind of looking at Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and some kind of weird things that are happening to Spock and Kirk as they read these events. So is there some memories that have been erased? Is there an alternate reality that this is somehow tapping into? You're not really sure. Then in the second half of the book, we jump back in time to when Kirk is first captain of the Enterprise and Gary Mitchell is still on the crew. So there's a lot of jumping around. There is a lot going on in this book. And, as most of us or some of us agreed in the buddy reads, there's a lot going on here, almost too much. And I think you could probably cut out a lot, or like several elements from this book, and you might improve the novel. But despite that, and despite the fact that there's a lot here to nitpick, I really enjoyed this. This was really, really good. Probably one of the best Star Trek novels I've read. I highly recommend it if you're into Star Trek fiction. Earlier in my Star Trek reading career, a few years ago, I probably would have not liked this. You have to let go of the fact that this is no longer canon. This has been kind of made obsolete by Star Trek First Contact. But it's very good. I strongly recommend it. In the buddy reads, we're going to read a second novel, which I'll talk about in my TBR list for the next couple weeks. But yeah, I'm really, really glad that we read this. This has been sitting on my shelf for a minute, so I'm glad I finally got to it. And this is a classic within Trek fiction. A lot of people enjoy this quite a bit. So yeah, I recommend it. Next up, we have a book for... we have a book for Rocket Summer Week 3. So Rocket Summer was created by Michael K. Vaughan. And there's 4 weeks in Rocket Summer, and you start out in the 30s or earlier, then move up to the 40s for week 2. Week 3 is the 50s. So for the 1950s, I read Arthur C. Clarke's Earthlight. This is a hard science fiction novel. I liked it quite a bit. And in short, it's about humanity has expanded kind of out into the solar system. There's Mars and Venus lead what's called the Federation. There's other colonies involved, but Mars and Venus are the big ones. And the Federation is at odds with the old planet Earth. And within Earth, the moon is included with Earth. And there is a kind of counter... So there's basically a conflict or a potential war that's brewing. And a counter spy, we follow... a counter spy is the main character. And we follow him to a kind of moon base in a moon city. And his job is to determine if there is a spy on the moon that's feeding the Federation, mostly Mars and Venus. If there's a leak, basically, of what people are up to on the moon. And there's like a secret moon base that they're building. It is hard science fiction, so you can tell, or it seems to me at least, that there were several kind of scientific and technological scenarios that Arthur C. Clarke came up with, and then kind of, all right, how can I put these together and kind of build a plot and throw a few characters into it. So, if hard science fiction, if you don't like that and you don't like the focus being on the science and technology, you're probably not going to like this. But I really enjoyed it. I thought this was great. The first chapter was amazing. It just describes a monorail ride over the moon, the lunar landscape during sunset, and it was beautiful to read. And there's a really cool space battle that happens, and Arthur C. Clarke, he invents this future technology. It takes place about 200 years into the future, and he has a very imaginative space battle that he writes. And there's a bunch of other stuff. There's also a supernova that happens to be going on. A lot of the action takes place within an observatory on the moon. So there's a lot going on here. It's not a very long book. It's pretty thin, but I like this a lot. So I'm glad I picked this one up for Rocket Summer Week 3. One of the reasons I picked this up is because my dad had recently visited, and he mentioned he read this as a kid. And so I was able to find this really nice copy from the 70s. Which you can see I've sealed up in plastic here to protect it. But yeah, I'm glad I read this, and I had a lot of fun talking to my dad about it. Okay, so that covers it for what I completed this week. But let me talk about a few things that are ongoing. So I didn't talk about this last week, but I am still reading DC's Finest. I guess DC's Finest number 1. Are these numbered? I think this was the first one. But it's Superman, the First Superhero by Jerry Siegal and Joe Shuster. I only read one issue this week, so I'm up to Action Comics number 12, I think? Or number 11. So I've only read the first 10 issues. And I'll admit I am looking forward to... Well, I know at some point Lex Luthor is going to be introduced. At some point, there's going to be a couple issues that cover... I presumably World War II. There's 2 issues that are titled Europe at War. And there's also some text stories coming up. There's at least 2 of them in here. I'm still amazed that not just Lois Lane, but the rest of the reporters at the Daily, it's called the Daily Star, not quite the Daily Planet yet, they all hate Clark Kent, and they treat him quite poorly. That kind of shocks me more than the characterization of Superman being slightly different and a little more violent than what we see. The lack of certain the lack of some of his powers doesn't really surprise me. I was expecting that. I mean, he can't fly yet. That hasn't been written yet. But I am looking forward to seeing if Lois Lane's attitude towards him changes. This covers 1938 to 1940. Something tells me that's probably not going to happen by 1940. This is very, very early Golden Age Superman. But I am excited to see Lex Luthor show up and just maybe see how he's different than, the Lex Luthor that we kind of know today. But yeah, I'm enjoying that. I do wish, these are very low stakes stories, so I'm looking forward to Lex Luthor. I am also still currently reading, and this is something I am reading out loud. I'm reading the Odyssey, and I'm not reading this copy, I'm reading it on my Kindle, so I think I've read the first 6 books, so I think I'm on book 7. I mentioned last time I talked about this that the first few books are just about Telemachus, Odysseus' son, and I was kind of eager for Odysseus to show up, and he has. So we have started with Odysseus' return home, so I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I'm wondering if it's going to jump back in time, because right now he doesn't have a crew. So I'm not sure if he's going to go get a crew, if we're going to go back in time and kind of join him with his original crew that he departed Troy with. So I'm not really sure. I did read in elementary school a long, long time ago a children's abridged version of this. And in that children's version, I mean, it just jumps right into Odysseus. It kind of starts with Odysseus, and we catch up with Telemachus later, if I remember correctly. But I'm enjoying this. And this is, of course, the Robert Fagles translation. I've read Robert Fagles' translation of the Iliad. And it reads very well. Again, I'm reading it out loud. I'm enjoying it a lot, but slowly going through it. And next up, this is the last book I want to talk about. I'm currently reading for Jane Austen July. This is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. And though I wouldn't... Well, let me just say, this is the third Jane Austen novel I've read. Romance in general, I don't read. So this is not a page-turner for me, but despite that, I am really enjoying this. I think this might end up being my favorite Jane Austen novel that I've read. I've previously read Pride and Prejudice and Emma. And, I mean, plot-wise, not much is going on. The main character... what's her name? Catherine. Catherine Morland is kind of staying in the town of Bath, kind of like, I guess, on a vacation. And I know she's going to head up to this place, Northanger Abbey, and it's going to turn into, there's going to be a kind of a gothic element that shows up. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's a whole chapter where they talk about novels, and Jane Austen kind of, criticizes people that don't like to read novels and just read nonfiction. And there's people today, I think, that are still like that. So Jane Austen, I'm really starting to see with this book, she understands people, and she can also create very realistic and just characters that are such full of life. Also, there's just some, I think maybe I'm noticing it here more than the 2 previous books that I've read. She's got some sick burns about some character. Mrs. Allen, there's this great line where she just says, she's the type of woman that you're surprised when you meet her that anyone would marry her. And it's like, oh, geez, that's pretty rough. But the book is kind of full of lines like that. So I'm enjoying this quite a bit. Like I said, I'm slowly going through it. I'm not even halfway through with it yet. And I've been reading it for a few days. So I'm slowly going through it, but I'm enjoying it quite a bit. And that's it for the books that I've either finished or I'm currently reading. So let's talk about kind of the next couple weeks. And some of these I've mentioned in my last video. The first one is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. I'm going to classify this as books that I should have read in high school. So I know that people read this in high school. I never did. I've been rewatching Seinfeld, and Jerry, when George is unemployed, Jerry constantly refers to George as Biff, referencing Death of a Salesman. So I want to understand the reference better. So I should be able to squeeze this in maybe next, or maybe after this next book I'm going to talk about. One book that's coming up, I'm going to start this maybe after Death of a Salesman, or maybe immediately after Northanger Abbey. This is Imzadi by Peter David. This is going to be also for BookTrek 2025. And this is the second book in our group reads that we're doing that Brandy from the Book Collectic has set up for us. So I'm really excited to read this. This is actually, I think, the first Trek novel I ever bought. And I ended up DNFing it at the time. Peter David, this is written by Peter David. He passed away this year. I'm a much better reader now than I was when I first started this. So I am going to finish it this time, I'm sure. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. Next up, we're just going to talk about a couple more Star Trek novels that I'll mention. I mentioned this last time, and I might not start this next week. I might not even start it this month, but just to kind of outline 2 books that I do want to read for the rest of BookTrek, which will go on through August. This one is Planet of Judgement by Joe Haldeman. Joe Haldeman, of course, wrote the excellent Forever War. So I'm really, really excited to read one of his Star Trek novels. He ended up writing 2 of them. This is also from the Bantam era. So this is the earliest era of Trek novels. I mentioned, the pocketbooks, numbered era in the 80s and 90s. This was written, I'm surely in the 70s. So I want to read more of the Bantam era. In addition to that, I also want to read another book by Diane Duane. This is Star Trek The Next Generation, Dark Mirror. I mentioned this last time as well. But I still want to read this before the end of BookTrek. I've previously read, a long time ago, I read Spock's World. I probably didn't appreciate it as much. I've mentioned in the past I did not like the giant novels when I first got into Star Trek. I should have just read plain old numbered books that act as unaired episodes, and got my Star Trek fix that way before jumping into like special stories that are a little bit broader than what a regular numbered novel. This one is from, I guess this is from the numbered era. I mean, we'll say it's from the numbered era, but clearly it's not numbered. It seems like it's a little bit special. So yeah, Spock's World, though I thought it was a good book, I didn't really enjoy it enough, so I do need to reread that at some point. But this year I read The Wounded Sky by Diane Duane, and I thought that was excellent. So I want to read more from this author. I've heard her talk about this in an interview, and I'm really excited to check it out. And this is also, it's worth noting, the Star Trek Next Generation never actually had a mirror universe episode. Even Star Trek Picard, unless I'm mistaken, in season 2 they go to like an alternate reality, but it's not the mirror universe. It's similar to the mirror universe, but not really. So this is, as far as I know, maybe there's more maybe there's more mirror universe TNG books, but there's really not anything canon that's TNG in the mirror universe. So I'm excited to read that. And then 2 books more I want to read. I've mentioned this before. Before the end of July, I want to read at least 1 or 2 stories out of this. This is The Continental Op by Dashiell Hammett. It's a short story collection. So I want to read this for PI July. That's a BookTube event created by Jim at Mystery and Mayhem. So I wish I had more time, or I wish I was a faster reader to read like a full novel or even complete this collection. It's not going to happen, but I will at the very least, before the end of the month, I'll read 1 story out of here. So I'm looking forward to that. And then lastly, so this week is Rocket Summer Week. What is it? Week 4 is coming up. And the idea of Rocket Summer Week 4 is you read something from the 1960s. I am not going to get to this week. This is Inferio by Jack Vance. This is an author that I have a lot of interest in. I've read some short stories and novellas by him. I like him a lot. So there is a 5th week in July. So hopefully I might be able to squeeze this in before the end of July. We'll see. But if not, I mean, a couple videos ago, I had a huge science fiction TBR and a bunch of different books from different eras of science fiction that I want to check out. This is one of them, and if I'm able to squeeze in a book for the 1960s, I'm sure it's probably going to be this one. If it's not this one, if I can't read the full novel for week 4 of Rocket Summer, I will probably find some short story out there. Hopefully I can find one free on Project Gutenberg from the 60s, and I'll read that instead. But yeah, at some point soon, I do want to read this. And that's it for books. So if you're just here for the books, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. But I do want to talk about 1 movie and then 1 TV series that I've watched. The movie that I watched this week was to follow up on my Godzilla movie that I watched last week. I watched Godzilla vs. Biollante. This was made in 1989. It is a sequel to the previous Godzilla movie I watched, The Return of Godzilla from 1984. This is the second time I've seen this movie. The first time, it's generally among Godzilla fans, it's very highly regarded. It's also a rare movie to get your hands on a physical copy. I'm just going to throw out there, eBay exists. It's the legit copies are very expensive, but eBay exists. You can, anyway. Yeah. This movie, when I first saw it, I thought it was a little bit overrated, like Godzilla 1984 or The Return of Godzilla. I thought it was somewhat tensionless, overrated, and this one was awkward. The first half of this has kind of this, like, I don't know. Let me also say, I did watch this over 2 nights, so that's not the best way to watch a movie. So the first half of the movie, which I don't really like, has kind of like this corporate espionage plot where these guys are going after they call them G-cells, cells from Godzilla. And there's a lot of actors that are English speaking, and they're just not good actors. Now, if you've seen Godzilla movies, or if you've seen, the recent Squid Game series is an example of something from the East, or something that's a non-English speaking cast that does have some English speaking roles, and the American British actors are terrible. They're not. They might not even be real actors. This movie has a lot of that. Normally, I'm okay just kind of ignoring it. I just accept that, hey, this movie is made in a non-English speaking country. The first audience that's going to see this is, in this case, a Japanese audience. It's made for Japanese viewers first and foremost. They don't really care if the English dialogue doesn't sound quite right. And normally I'm okay just accepting, like Stranger Things, Squid Game, the bad acting from the English speaking actors does not bother me at all. A lot of people don't like it. I don't care. But in this, there is a lot of it. And it wasn't just bad line delivery. It was bad physical acting. There's some action scenes that just felt very cheap, very low budget. And it kind of ruins the first half of this movie. To explain the plot, there's not much that you really need to know. They defeated Godzilla in the last movie. Godzilla's coming back, of course. There's also this other monster, Biollante, that is a combination of human DNA and Godzilla DNA, and for some reason it makes this weird evolving Lovecraftian creature that is kind of plant-like. I'm probably missing some key aspect to what goes into Biollante. But the Biollante suits and puppets are really, really good. And that brings me to what's good about this movie. In the second half, when Godzilla shows up and the city destruction starts and he goes on his rampage, the movie suddenly turns really good and is much better, in my opinion, than The Return of Godzilla. The city destruction with Godzilla looks great. There's a lot of low-angle shots, which you need to kind of sell the idea that this monster is really big. The cityscape, in my opinion, looks better. There's also Japan has this kind of floating ship defensive aircraft thing called the Super X-2. It's kind of this ugly slug-looking thing. The Super X was in Return of Godzilla, and I found the Super X really boring. The Super X-2 is much better. The scenes with the Super X-2, they're not as long, they're a little bit quicker, and they're faster paced. And it really works quite well. After the Super X-2, there's also this great scene with this army unit that's shooting bacteria-laced bazooka shells at Godzilla. It's really good. And then the final fight between Godzilla and Biollante is great. There's a lot of great stuff. Biollante has these tentacles that look good, and when they get blown up, there's a bunch of green goo that goes everywhere. It's really, really great suitmation action. So though this movie, I do find it overrated, there's better movies, in my opinion, in the Heisei era. The second half of this is pretty good for a Godzilla movie. It's kind of entertaining in how wacky it gets with Biollante. At the end, you see this woman's I mean, I'm spoiling it a little bit, but it's not a really big deal. You'll see her like portrait show up in the sky, and there's this weird, sparkly, mystical thing going on. It's bonkers, but it's a lot of fun. So that was the only movie that I watched. The last thing I want to talk about is I started Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I realized that I don't have Paramount, but I realized that season 1 was on Amazon. It's also on Pluto TV, by the way. So if you're a Star Trek fan and you haven't seen Strange New Worlds, I highly recommend it. I'm a 90s fan at heart. I also have gained to appreciate the original series quite a bit. And I figured I was going to like this. I'm not a big Discovery fan. I'm not a Star Trek Picard fan. I figured I was going to like this. I knew it was a return to more episodic Star Trek. But it surprised me with how much I love this show. I've seen the first 8 episodes. I think there's only 2 more left in season 1. And I'm going to figure out a way to watch season 2 because, man, this was really, really good. It does have, in general, a lighter tone. It is episodic. It does comedy very well. I think if you're a 90s Trek fan, you have to kind of maybe set aside some of the things you might like about 90s Star Trek and compare it more to the original series. I think it does comedy kind of like the original series did comedy. It's also episodic. So that means that though there is overall kind of a lighter tone, it can also get serious, and it can do different types of stories. And it is refreshing after the tiresome serialization of both Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. I mean, in those shows, Star Trek Picard's, I haven't finished Star Trek Discovery, but Star Trek Picard, I mean, if you don't like the story that's going on in that season, that whole season is going to suck for you. Whereas this, you might not like the individual episode, but you're going to get an ending to that episode, and then the next episode, you're going to get a brand new story. There is a lot of character progression that happens in the season, and there are stories that do span multiple episodes. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. There is an element of serialization to it, but each week you're going to get an ending to a story. I mentioned that, overall it's got a lighter comedic tone, but since it's episodic, there's also an episode where they fight the Gorn, and it turns into kind of this interesting character study on one of the characters, and it deals with her past trauma because when she was younger, she had a run-in with the Gorn, and it's traumatized her. So you can have kind of this almost horror episode that focuses on a character's past trauma. And also there's some interesting science fiction elements. They've toned down the technobabble, which at first annoyed me. But, then you have an episode where they talk about brown dwarfs and black holes and black hole accretion disk. And it's great. So, it's got plenty of science in there. There are things, again, if you're a 90s fan, you could nitpick about. My big nitpick is like TOS, they have their rank, it's not rank insignia, but their ranks are denoted by kind of full and half kind of bands or braids around their uniform sleeves. And don't scrutinize it too closely because it doesn't really make any sense. So, there's things in here you could nitpick it to death. Where did I put it? Like this book, Strange from the Sky, you could nitpick this book. But in spite of it being nitpickable to death, it's really good. Strange New Worlds is the same way, despite the fact that you could just tear this show apart, and if you wanted to hate it, you could choose to hate it, and you could choose for it to make you angry. But it's really good. If you haven't seen Strange New Worlds and you're a Star Trek fan, I highly recommend it. I think it's great. And I'm excited to watch Season 2, and I'll probably wait for Season 3 to come out on Blu-ray, or I'll figure out some way to watch it. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So that's all for this week. There's definitely going to be another weekly wrap-up coming out next weekend. Maybe at some point I will try to get back into doing Tag Tuesday videos. But that is all for now. Thank you.